Welcome to Sacred Seasons, a place where ancient stories breathe again, and the voice of the earth still whispers through time. Here, we walk the wheel of the year, honor the old gods and goddesses, and remember the wisdom written in the wind, the fire, the soil, and the stars. Take a deep breath, open your heart, and step with me beyond the veil of the ordinary. There is a moment in the year when the world holds its breath, a moment when the night stretches so deeply that it feels ancient, primal, almost alive. In that silence, something calls to us, not the familiar voice of celebration or routine, but something older, something that remembers fire as prayer and darkness as teacher. This is the threshold of the Winter Solstice, a doorway into the lost rituals that once shaped our connection with the earth. Sacred firelight was not decoration. It was communion. It was survival. It was the language through which our ancestors spoke to the unseen. When you imagine that world, you start to feel why these rituals mattered. There were no city lights pushing back the night, no clocks dictating the rhythm of life. The land itself was the guide, and winter demanded humility. The solstice invited people to step into their own shadow and trust that the sun would find its way home again. Fire became the symbol of that trust. Flames rising in the cold reminded the community that the earth never stops turning, and that every descent into darkness carries a hidden promise of returning light. The deeper you look into these traditions, the more you realize that they were not superstitions. They were psychological maps, teaching people how to navigate uncertainty, fear, and transformation. The fire was not meant to overpower the night, but to illuminate the path through it. This is where the feminine presence becomes essential, because she represents the womb of winter, the place where life rests before reawakening. The solstice is not the triumph of light over darkness. It is the relationship between them, the understanding that both are needed for rebirth. What makes these lost rituals so compelling today is that we are once again living in a kind of spiritual winter. Many people feel disconnected from meaning, from nature, and from themselves. Yet the old practices whisper a truth we have forgotten. The fire is always available if we choose to tend it. When we understand the solstice, as our ancestors did, it becomes less about ceremony and more about awakening, a call to step out of numbness and into presence, a call to remember that darkness is not punishment, it is incubation. And within that incubation, the sacred feminine breathes. This journey into the lost rituals of the winter solstice is not a reenactment. It is a reclamation. It is an invitation to rebuild our relationship with the earth, with our intuition, and with the cycles that shape every part of our lives. By returning to the firelight, we return to ourselves. By understanding what these rituals meant, we begin to understand why the human spirit keeps seeking the same truths across centuries. The solstice is a mirror, and the flame reflected in it is the part of you that refuses to be extinguished. If you stay with me through this exploration, you will see that these ancient practices were not created to entertain or impress. They were created to anchor the soul. And now, in a world that feels increasingly adrift, their wisdom rises again. The question is not whether the rituals still exist. The question is whether we are willing to remember the longest night of the year has always carried a weight that the human heart cannot ignore. When ancient people felt the solstice approaching, they sensed a shift in the world that went beyond temperature or daylight. They felt the presence of something vast moving beneath the surface of reality, as if the earth itself entered a moment of suspension. The sun's weakened arc across the sky was not just an astronomical phenomenon. It was a message, a reminder of vulnerability and dependence on forces far greater than human will. The night stretched longer, the cold deepened, and a collective awareness emerged that life had reached its most fragile point. In that tension, the solstice became a living threshold. Nothing was assured. The coming dawn was a promise made, but not yet fulfilled. People watched the horizon with a mixture of fear, reverence, and hope, knowing that the balance of the world rested in the return of a single flame. That fragility shaped their consciousness. It made them aware of every breath, every sound in the dark, every flicker of fire that kept death at bay. The solstice invited them to recognize the raw edges of existence, where survival was not a given but a prayer. This awareness crafted a relationship with nature that was intimate, humbling, and profoundly spiritual. In a world without artificial light, darkness was not merely the absence of sun. It was a presence with its own texture and intelligence. The night of the solstice felt full, dense, almost watchful. People believed the world held its breath because they themselves were holding theirs. It was the moment when time loosened its grip and the earth paused in an ancient rhythm older than any civilization. The phrase, "the sun stands still," was not poetic metaphor. It was an attempt to name an experience that touched every layer of the psyche. They saw the sky slow down, and within that slowing, they felt called inward. This was the night when the boundary between fear and faith became thin. The fear came from the possibility that light might not return. The faith came from generations of memory, proving that it always did. The solstice was a test of trust, not in doctrine or dogma, but in the rhythms of the earth. People did not wait passively. They responded with ritual because ritual gave shape to the unspoken. Firelight was their statement of allegiance to the returning sun. They lit flames not to conquer the night, but to honor its power and to declare their willingness to endure it. The night the earth stood still was also the night when human beings confronted their own internal landscapes. Without distraction, the dark exposed every doubt and every unvoiced longing. It was impossible to hide from oneself in a world illuminated only by fire. The solstice pulled people into a kind of psychological honesty. In the depth of the night, they learned to sit with uncertainty, to breathe through their unease, and to trust that the wheel would turn again. This was not weakness. It was initiation. It taught resilience rooted not in control, but in surrender to a larger rhythm. In this profound stillness, the feminine presence of the season revealed itself. Darkness was not seen as danger, but as the womb of creation. The solstice was the moment when the Dark Mother rested with the sun in her arms, holding it as seed and potential rather than as power. Ancient people understood that the deepest renewal happens in places where no light reaches. The night became a space of gestation, not doom. In that understanding, the lost rituals of the solstice found their purpose. They were ways of acknowledging that life begins quietly, in shadow, before it ever emerges into visibility. Standing at the threshold of the longest night allowed people to feel the world with uncommon clarity. They recognized that every cycle of growth requires a moment of pause. Every cycle of light requires a moment of descent. The solstice was the earth's pause, and firelight was humanity's response. Their flames did not push back the night. They conversed with it. They made peace with the unknown and allowed themselves to be held by the dark rather than swallowed by it. In that surrender, a deep wisdom was born. When you step into this understanding, you begin to see why the solstice mattered so much. It was not simply the turning of a season, it was the turning of consciousness. The night the earth stood still became a mirror for the human spirit. It revealed vulnerability, but it also awakened the internal flame that refuses to be extinguished. This is where the story of the winter solstice begins, at the edge of darkness. In the moment where the world pauses and invites us to remember that every return of light begins with a willingness to enter the night, fire did more than warm ancient bodies. It awakened ancient minds. When our ancestors gathered around the solstice flame, they were not staring at a simple element. They were looking into something they believed could see them back. The flicker of the fire, the way it breathed, the way it devoured wood and released light, convinced them that flame was a presence, not a tool. It responded to the world with its own rhythm, rising and falling like a living being. In that response, people recognized intelligence. Fire became not only a symbol of survival, but a companion in the dark. The winter solstice amplified this sense of presence. The world outside the fire's glow was cold, silent, and vast. The night pressed against the edges of the circle, and the fire felt like the only thread connecting humanity to warmth, life, and meaning. People understood that fire carried a truth the world depended on. It was the only force that transformed darkness into something visible. It turned the unknown into something knowable. Through fire, the hidden became revealed. That revelation sparked the belief that the flame itself was conscious, aware, and willing to guide those who respected it. It was always the women, the keepers of the hearth, who tended the fire through the long winters. This was not a menial task. It was a sacred responsibility. the feminine presence knew the nature of flame in a way that mirrored her own cycles. She understood how fire required breath to thrive, how it consumed to sustain, how it warmed but could also burn. The act of tending fire became a form of communication. Every adjustment of wood, every gathering of embers, every protection against the wind was a dialogue between the fire and the one who cared for it. Through this intimate tending, the fire became a teacher. People began to associate fire with consciousness because it reflected truths they recognized in themselves. Fire had hunger, desire, mood, volatility, and radiance. It transformed everything it touched. It purified and destroyed with equal honesty. It carried the ability to protect or consume depending on how it was treated. In studying the flame, humans studied their own emotional landscapes. The fire became a mirror of human nature. The solstice rituals magnified this connection, turning fire into a sacred witness to the inner workings of the soul. During the winter solstice, the community gathered around the flame not only to survive the cold, but to understand the unseen movement of their own lives. Fire revealed what darkness concealed. It illuminated fears, ambitions, regrets, and hopes. The more people stared into the flame, the more they began to feel their own inner light flicker in response. They saw their thoughts dance like sparks. They watched their doubts dissolve like smoke. They felt clarity rise slowly, the way embers glow brighter when touched by air. Fire became a guide into self. There was a profound belief that fire could consume what weighed the spirit down. People whispered their burdens into the flames, trusting that the fire understood the language of release. It was not about spectacle. It was about transformation. The burning of offerings, branches, bread, or symbolic tokens was a physical expression of letting go. Fire became the first form of psychological purification, long before the concept of healing existed. Flame was the tool through which humans confronted their inner winters and prepared themselves for renewal. The consciousness of fire was also tied to its unpredictability. Flames could flare without warning or collapse into embers in an instant. This unpredictability reminded people that life was always moving, always shifting, always demanding attention. Fire punished neglect. It rewarded presence. It asked for devotion, partnership, and awareness. Through the work of feeding and shaping the flame, people learned responsibility. They learned rhythm. They learned the emotional intelligence required to keep something alive. In this way, fire became a teacher of discipline and devotion. The longer the night stretched, the deeper this teaching went. The solstice became a ceremonial dialogue between humanity and the fire that sustained it. The community saw fire as the heart of their gathering, the center from which strength radiated. Without it, they were scattered individuals facing the cold alone. With it, they were a single organism breathing in unison. Fire created unity. It shaped identity. It reminded the tribe that survival was not found in isolation but in shared warmth, shared intention, and shared trust. To ancient people, the fire was conscious because it awakened consciousness within them. It sharpened their senses, opened their intuition, and softened their defenses. It brought them into the present moment with a depth of attention few experiences could replicate. In the firelight, fears were acknowledged, memories resurfaced, insights emerged, and decisions were made with clarity that only the solstice night could bring. Fire was the original altar upon which the human spirit learned to see itself. This is why the solstice flame remains a symbol of power. It represents the light that resides within, the force capable of transformation, the spark that turns darkness into meaning. To understand the consciousness of fire is to understand the consciousness of the soul. The flame that once guided ancient tribes through the longest night still waits for anyone willing to sit beside it and listen. When winter tightened its grip and the solstice night settled over the land, people instinctively moved toward one another. They formed circles around the fire not only to survive the cold, but to remember who they were. In those circles, something profound happened. The flame illuminated more than faces. It illuminated the collective spirit of the people gathered there, revealing their bond, their stories, and their shared purpose. The circle became a sanctuary where truth could be spoken without fear, where memory became medicine, and where the warmth of human presence made the darkness feel less immense. In the ancient world, Gatherings around the solstice fire were more than casual moments. They were ceremonies of identity. Each person in the circle held a thread of the tribe's story, and when they spoke, these threads wove into a tapestry that kept their lineage alive. Knowledge was passed through voice, never through a written word. Wisdom was preserved through repetition, not on pages, but in hearts. The elders carried the weight of memory, guiding the younger ones through tales that blended history, myth, and spiritual insight. In that circle, nothing was performed. Everything was shared because everything mattered. The stories told during the solstice were not entertainment. They were maps of the human condition. Myths explained why the sun returned every year, offering courage to face the cold. Ancestral tales taught resilience, reminding the tribe that others had endured and survived. Personal stories created vulnerability, allowing individuals to admit fear, loss, or longing without shame. Around the flame, every voice was necessary, and every story added depth to the collective understanding of life. The circle erased hierarchy. The fire made each face equal. The night made every soul honest. This ritual of shared storytelling carried a psychological purpose that modern people often overlook. In a time when the world offered no guarantees, storytelling created continuity. It reminded people that their struggles were not isolated. When someone admitted their fears, others recognized the same fear within themselves. When someone celebrated a small victory, it strengthened the hope of the entire tribe. The firelight created a space where emotions that might remain hidden during brighter days rose to the surface. Through this emotional exchange, the community purified itself, not with smoke or incense, but with truth spoken out loud. The feminine presence shaped these gatherings in subtle but powerful ways. Women were the keepers of memory, the protectors of continuity, and the ones who understood how to hold space for vulnerability. They taught the community how to listen without judgment and how to interpret silence as part of the story. In their presence, the circle became a place where unspoken feelings found room to exist. The fire illuminated faces, but the feminine energy illuminated hearts. She reminded the community that connection is not created by sharing warmth, but by sharing truth. In the circle, people reconnected with something they rarely felt during the rest of the year: belonging. The solstice night stripped life to its essentials, and this simplicity made human connections stand out with greater clarity. The fire warmed everyone equally. The darkness surrounded everyone equally. The stories touched everyone equally. This equality dissolved the barriers that daily life constructed. Suddenly, the strong admitted their fatigue. The quiet spoke their wisdom. The wounded found comfort. The young learned courage. The elders remembered their own childhood winters. In this sacred exchange, the tribe rediscovered itself. There was also a spiritual dimension woven into these gatherings. People believed the ancestors listened when their stories were spoken. They felt the presence of those who had lived through older winters sitting just beyond the edges of the firelight. The circle became a meeting place between seen and unseen worlds. When a story honored a loved one who had passed, the tribe sensed that person's spirit nearby, warming itself at the same flame. When someone spoke of a difficult lesson, they felt the guidance of ancestors who had walked similar paths. The fire served as a bridge between generations, a glowing reminder that the living and the dead shared the same eternal cycle. As the night deepened, the circle tightened. Voices softened. The rhythm of breathing aligned. The stories began to shift from the outer world to the inner one. People spoke about dreams, omens, and intuitions that had stirred during the long winter nights. These inner experiences were treated with reverence, not dismissal. The solstice was a time when the boundary between consciousness and mystery thinned. The circle allowed people to explore that boundary together, knowing that each insight, no matter how small, contributed to the tribe's understanding of the world. When you look at this ancient practice through modern eyes, you see its necessity. People today feel isolated, even when surrounded by others. The rush of daily life leaves little room for deep conversation, shared vulnerability, or collective reflection. Yet the human spirit still craves what the solstice circle once offered: connection, meaning, and the reassurance that no one faces the darkness alone. The circle around the flame answered that need with honesty and presence. It reminded everyone that to be human is to be part of a story that extends far beyond individual experience. The circle around the fire did more than pass the time. It shaped identity, strengthened community, and provided a spiritual framework for surviving the harshest season. The winter solstice was not endured alone. It was witnessed and shared. Each voice contributed to the flame's meaning. Each story helped lift the weight of the long night. In that circle, the tribe found not only warmth, but clarity. The fire revealed what mattered. The stories revealed why, and the unity formed around that flame became the foundation upon which the solstice drew its enduring power. When ancient people approached the solstice flame, they did not see it as an object to be admired. They saw a living presence that required nourishment, partnership, and conversation. The act of feeding the fire was not a simple gesture. It was the heart of the ritual itself. Every offering placed into the flames carried intention, memory, and meaning. It was a dialogue between humans and the living intelligence they believed burned at the center of their world. The fire received what they no longer needed and returned in sight, strength, and renewal in its rising smoke. Feeding the light began long before the fire was ignited. People gathered branches with reverence, choosing wood with symbolic purpose. Oak was favored for its strength and longevity, ash for its connection to the realm of spirit, and pine for its promise of persistence through the cold. Each tree held a teaching, and when its wood was offered to the flame, that teaching joined the ritual. Nothing was random. Everything held a story. The choice of wood was a silent acknowledgement of the natural forces that protected life even in the harshest season. When the fire was finally lit, the offerings became more personal. People placed herbs, grains, and even small handmade tokens into the flame. Each offering represented something they were ready to release: fear of the coming year, grief that had lingered too long, patterns of thought that kept them small. The solstice flame became the first altar where the human spirit practiced the art of letting go. This was not done with dramatic ceremony. It was done with quiet sincerity. They trusted the fire to transform what their hearts could not carry alone. Feeding the light also meant acknowledging abundance. In a season marked by scarcity, offering food to the flame was an act of gratitude and trust. Each handful of grain placed in the fire was a statement of faith that the earth would provide again. Bread was offered not as sacrifice, but a celebration of the community's resilience. These acts reflected a deep understanding that giving nourished the soul as much as receiving nourished the body. Feeding the flame became a way to remind themselves that generosity was a form of strength, not a depletion. The feminine influence was woven deeply into this practice. Women understood the nature of giving life, and they recognized the fire as a symbol of that principle. They were the ones who taught the tribe that feeding the flame was an act of intimacy, not obligation. They showed how to hold an offering with intention, how to breathe meaning into it, and how to feel the shift that happened once it left their hands and entered the fire. They knew that the flame did more than consume. It listened. It mirrored. It revealed the emotional truth hidden within the ritual. For the tribe, feeding the light was an external symbol of an internal movement. When they placed an offering into the flame, they were acknowledging that every transformation requires fuel. The fire could not rise without something to burn. In the same way, the human spirit cannot evolve without releasing what is old and embracing what is new. The solstice rituals taught them that growth is not passive. It is a conscious act of tending one's own inner flame. Feeding the light became a physical reminder that renewal is a choice, not an accident. These offerings also served as messages to the unseen. People believed the ancestors watched the flames, listening to the intentions carried in the smoke. They trusted that the spirit world understood their gestures. When a piece of cloth, a carved symbol, or a dried herb entered the fire, it was sent to those who had walked before them. The offerings became a bridge between the worlds, a way of saying, I am learning. I am releasing. I am ready. This connection to the ancestors strengthened the courage needed to face the long winter ahead. Modern life often forgets these truths. People rush through endings, avoiding reflection, pushing change without understanding its cost. The solstice teachings reveal another way. Feeding the light invites a slower, wiser approach. It shows that release is not a loss, but a collaboration with the natural cycle of transformation. It shows that gratitude strengthens resilience. It shows that the spirit, like the fire, becomes brighter when tended with intention. To feed the light is to acknowledge that the inner flame requires nourishment just as surely as the outer one. What makes this practice so powerful is its simplicity. There is no need for elaborate rituals or ornate tools. A flame, an offering, and a moment of sincerity are enough. In that moment, the line between past and present dissolves. You step into the same circle your ancestors once gathered around. You feel the same truth they felt. Transformation begins with a single act of letting go and a single act of trust. The solstice flame becomes a reminder that the light within you grows when you choose to feed it. In returning to this forgotten art, we remember that fire is not only a symbol of survival, it is a companion that teaches balance. It shows that destruction is part of creation and release is part of renewal. Feeding the flame is an act of courage, an act of clarity, and an act of devotion to your own becoming. The solstice invites you to practice this ancient wisdom and to recognize that every offering placed into the fire opens space for the light that is waiting to rise. There is a kind of silence that does not simply fall over a landscape, but enters a person. During the winter solstice, that silence surrounded ancient communities like a living presence. It was not the emptiness of absence, but the fullness of something waiting to be understood. The world grew quiet because everything essential had withdrawn into its center. The rivers slowed, the wind softened, the animals retreated, even the sun lowered itself into a state of near stillness. In that rare moment, the earth invited humans to do the same. The solstice was not only an outer night, it was an inner passage, and its doorway was silence. This silence was intentional. People honored it because they sensed that entering the longest night with noise would disrupt the deeper purpose of the season. The solstice was a teacher of stillness, and stillness required attention. The fire crackled, but voices softened, movements slowed. The breath became a point of awareness. The silence was not a lack of sound. It was a presence that sharpened perception. When distractions faded, the world revealed itself with startling intimacy. The creak of a tree in the cold became a message. The shifting of snow became a reminder of the silence turned the land into a mirror. What ancient people discovered in that mirror was the beginning of introspection. Without the demands of the harvest, without the responsibilities of daily work, without the brightness that kept emotions at bay, the solstice night pulled the mind inward. In the quiet, thoughts rose with clarity they could not achieve in louder seasons. Questions that had been ignored during the rush of life returned to the surface. What am I carrying that no longer has purpose? What part of me is asking to be transformed? What must end before something new can begin? These were not philosophical ideas. They were survival inquiries. Silence made them impossible to avoid. This inner gate opened because stillness dissolves the noise that keeps a person disconnected from themselves. In the firelit silence, people felt truths they had buried. They sensed desires they had dismissed. They faced fears they had outrun. The solstice was more than a celestial turning, it was a psychological initiation. The darkness offered protection, not punishment. It provided a container where the soul could unclench, where the heart could speak without interruption. The silence became a doorway into parts of the self that only emerge when the world stops demanding performance. Women understood this gate intuitively. They recognized the way silence nourished intuition, heightening senses that bright daylight often overwhelmed. They saw the hidden wisdom in the quiet, the subtle movements within the body, the emotions rising in waves, the insights that came unannounced. They taught the community how to approach silence, not as emptiness, but as presence. They held space for the unspoken, guiding others through the inner terrain unveiled by the solstice. Their role was not to break the silence, but to defend it, ensuring that the inner gate remained open long enough for true reflection to occur. The silence around the solstice fire also altered perception of time. Hours stretched, thoughts slowed, and the boundary between now and memory softened. People drifted into a state that was neither waking nor dreaming. In that liminal space, intuition sharpened. Insights surfaced, Answers appeared without force. This altered awareness was not accidental. It was a natural result of honoring the season's rhythm. The long night was not endured. It was entered, and in entering it, the community accessed a deeper form of consciousness that daylight rarely allowed. The inner gate opened further when people realized that silence does not isolate, it connects. The absence of noise made vulnerability visible. A single sigh could reveal exhaustion. A shift in posture could reveal sorrow. The quiet around the fire allowed people to sense one another's emotions without words. This created a shared intimacy that strengthened the circle. In the silence, individuals felt less alone, not more. The stillness offered companionship grounded in presence rather than conversation. It taught the tribe that understanding comes not from speaking, but from listening to what arises between breaths. Modern life has forgotten this. People fill their days with stimulation, mistaking noise for meaning. Silence feels threatening because it exposes what distraction conceals, yet the solstice teaches that silence is the doorway to resilience. When you sit in quiet, the mind reorganizes itself. The heart softens, the spirit resets. The inner gate opens because silence removes the layers that keep you from hearing your own wisdom. It reveals what you have ignored, but also what you have forgotten to cherish. In this way, the solstice invites healing that cannot be found in movement. It is healing found in stillness. Through silence, ancient people prepared themselves for the return of the sun. They pressed their attention inward so that, when the first light returned, they could meet it with clarity. The silence cleansed the mind, softened the spirit, and made space for insight. It transformed the long night from something to survive into something to experience. The inner gate opened because silence revealed the truth at the center of the solstice. That renewal begins in darkness, and understanding begins in quiet. To honor the solstice is to honor that silence. It is to step into the same stillness that opened the inner gate for those who came before us. It is to recognize that the wisdom they found in the long night is still available to anyone willing to pause, listen, and let the quiet rearrange the inner world. Through the silence, the flame within becomes visible. Through the flame, the path through the darkness becomes clear. Ancient people understood something modern life has forgotten. The solstice night is not empty. It is inhabited by forces that move through the world with a purpose older than memory. These beings were not imagined as monsters or threats, but as guardians, guides, and messengers who appeared only when the veil between worlds thinned to its most delicate point. They were called shadow walkers, not because they belonged to darkness, but because they understood it. They walked where human eyes struggled to see, carrying truths that could only emerge in winter's stillness. The shadow walkers were not a single type of spirit, but a wide spectrum of presences shaped by the beliefs and landscapes of different tribes. To the northern peoples, some were ancestors who returned to walk beside the living, ensuring the continuity of the family line. To others, they were nature spirits, embodiments of winter winds, ravens, wolves, or the silent strength of the frozen earth. Some were thought to be echoes of the gods themselves, moving quietly to observe those who honored the turning of the year. All of them were understood as part of the natural order. They did not disrupt the solstice. They were woven into it. In the ancient worldview, the solstice was a moment when the world became porous. Boundaries loosened, realities overlapped, human beings stepped closer to the unseen, and the unseen stepped closer to them. This meeting was not rooted in fear. It was rooted in reverence. People welcomed the presence of the shadow walkers because they believed these beings carried guidance. They saw them as reminders that life is larger than the visible world and that the winter season reveals truths that cannot be spoken in any other time. The fire played a crucial role in this relationship. Its glow created a safe circle for the living, but it also served as a beacon to the shadow walkers. The flame signaled that the tribe was ready to listen. When the fire crackled in unusual rhythms, or when sparks rose unexpectedly, people believed the spirits were making themselves known. The smoke that drifted upward was seen as a pathway between worlds. Offerings placed into the flame were invitations for the shadow walkers to share their wisdom, which came not in words but in impressions, sensations, and shifts of intuition. The presence of these beings encouraged introspection. People believed the shadow walkers reflected aspects of the human psyche, mirroring emotions or truths that individuals had not yet confronted. A sudden chill might signal unresolved grief. A stirring in the wind might represent the need for courage. The soft echo of an animal's call in the distance could symbolize guidance on a difficult path. The shadow walkers served as external manifestations of the inner landscape, helping people navigate the depths that the solstice naturally brought to the surface. The feminine perspective offered a different understanding of these beings. Women sensed the shadow walkers not as figures walking outside the fire's glow, but as presences woven into the emotional and intuitive atmosphere of the night. They recognized the way their own intuition sharpened during the solstice, as if something whispered behind the veil of silence. They felt the pull of awareness expanding beyond the physical. They saw the shadow walkers as allies of transformation, forces that guided the community through the internal passage from darkness to light. They taught others to listen not with their ears, but with the body, the heart, and the subtle movements of energy around them. This partnership between humans and the unseen shaped the tribe's understanding of fear. The solstice night held intensity, but it did not hold terror. The shadow walkers taught that the unknown is not an enemy. It is an invitation. The darkness became a landscape to be entered with curiosity rather than avoidance. People learned to walk with their fears instead of running from them. They learned that transformation happens when you face what you do not understand. The shadow walkers were embodiments of this truth, guiding the tribe through the psychological winter that mirrored the outer one. Modern life often dismisses these beings as folklore, but their symbolic significance remains powerful. The shadow walkers represent the parts of ourselves we meet only in stillness. They are the unresolved emotions that rise in quiet hours, the instincts that whisper when we are alone, the intuition that becomes sharper when the world slows down. They are the archetypes that appear in dreams, the truths we uncover in solitude, the inner wisdom that emerges when external noise fades. They continue to walk beside anyone who enters their own inner winter with willingness and awareness. To recognize their presence is to remember that not all guidance comes from light. Some of the most important insights rise from the shadow. The solstice teaches that growth requires meeting those inner figures with respect. When you step into your own darkness, the shadow walkers appear not as threats, but as teachers. They help you uncover what you have hidden, understand what you have avoided, and reclaim parts of yourself that have been left behind. The shadow walkers of midwinter remind us that the path through darkness is not walked alone. The solstice is not a solitary experience. It is a convergence of worlds, a meeting of visible and invisible forces, an invitation to deepen your relationship with what lies beneath the surface. When ancient people honored the solstice, they honored these unseen companions, trusting that everything revealed in the long night would prepare them for the returning sun. And the truth remains the same. Only by walking with your shadows do you discover the strength that guides you into the light. The world we live in has drifted far from the rhythm that shaped the ancient solstice rituals. We move through our days surrounded by artificial light, constant noise, and a pace that rarely allows us to pause long enough to feel the seasons move through us. Yet, even in this modern landscape, the human spirit still longs for the same experiences that guided our ancestors through the darkest nights. We may not gather around open fires beneath the winter stars, but the hunger for meaning, for connection, and for renewal has never faded. It waits beneath the surface, calling us back to the wisdom we once lived by instinct. Reclaiming the solstice fire in the modern world is not about copying ancient rituals or trying to recreate the past. It is about rediscovering the principles that gave those rituals power. What mattered to the ancestors was not the shape of the ceremony, but the intention behind it. Fire was treated as a partner in transformation because they recognized its ability to change everything it touched. When we understand that fire symbolizes clarity, courage, and conscious renewal, we begin to see that the solstice is less about tradition and more about remembering how to live in alignment with the cycles that govern life. The first step in reclaiming the fire is recognizing how disconnected we have become from our own internal rhythms. We force ourselves into constant productivity, ignoring the natural need for rest that winter embodies. We expect perpetual brightness, rejecting the introspective power of darkness. We resist endings, clinging to patterns that no longer nourish us. The solstice teaches the opposite. It reminds us that rest is sacred, darkness is fertile, and endings are necessary. When we approach the season with this understanding, we open ourselves to the same transformation that guided ancient people into a new cycle of life. Fire, in this modern context, becomes a symbolic tool rather than a physical necessity. Lighting a single candle with intention can replicate the psychological and spiritual effect of the great bonfires of old. The flame invites stillness. It anchors attention. It signals to the mind that something meaningful is beginning. When you sit with that small fire, you are engaging in a conversation with your own inner light. You are acknowledging that even the faintest glow can change the atmosphere of your inner world. This simple act becomes an entry into a deeper relationship with the self. Reclaiming the fire also means reclaiming the practice of release. Modern life encourages accumulation of possessions, responsibilities, expectations, emotional burdens. Without conscious release, the spirit becomes heavy. The solstice teaches that letting go is not a weakness, but a ritual of renewal. When you write down something you are ready to release and place it into the flame, you are engaging in an ancient psychological practice. You are giving form to an inner shift. You are acknowledging that transformation requires surrender. The flame consumes what you no longer need and returns clarity in its smoke. The feminine wisdom of the solstice becomes crucial in this modern reclamation. The feminine does not push. She listens. She allows. She receives. She understands the necessity of cyclist descent, incubation, emergence. To reclaim the fire with modern eyes is to embrace these principles within yourself. It is to recognize that growth cannot be forced. It must be nourished in silence, in rest, in the soft spaces where intuition has room to speak. The dark mother of ancient winter still breathes through our modern longing for meaning. She teaches that returning to your own center is the first act of renewal. The modern world also calls for a new kind of community around the fire. While we may not gather in physical circles as often, we gather through shared intention. When people choose to honor the solstice together, whether in person or in spirit, that create a field of connection that mirrors the ancient circles around the flame. Sharing reflections, expressing gratitude, releasing burdens, or setting intentions becomes a form of communal anchoring. The fire, whether literal or symbolic, becomes the point around which hearts align. It reminds us that transformation is more powerful when witnessed, just as it was in ancient times. Another aspect of reclaiming the fire is the return to earth consciousness. Our ancestors understood that the solstice was not only a personal initiation but an ecological truth. The earth rests, and so should we. The sun returns, and so must our awareness of our place within the natural world. Modern disconnection often stems from forgetting that we belong to the same cycle the ancestors honored. By reclaiming the fire, we reconnect with the truth that we are part of the living earth, shaped by its seasons, nourished by its rhythms, and renewed by its light. This reclamation does not require grand gestures. It requires honesty. It requires willingness. It requires the courage to pause. When you sit before a flame, even for a few moments, you are stepping into the same timeless space that shaped ancient wisdom. You are remembering that the solstice is not a holiday. It is a turning of the soul. It is an invitation to shed what has grown heavy, to breathe into what is rising, and to honor the cycle that carries all life forward. Reclaiming the fire means reclaiming yourself. It means remembering that you are not separate from the ancient wisdom that guided humanity through countless winters. The flame you light today is part of the same lineage of flames that once illuminated the darkest nights of the world. Through that flame, the old knowledge becomes new again. Through that flame, the solstice becomes alive within you. And through that flame, the path toward renewal becomes clear. The winter solstice marks the moment when the sun begins its slow ascent back into the sky. Yet for ancient people, the true miracle was not only celestial, it was internal. They believed that the returning sun was also a reflection of the inner light rising within every person who honored the long night with awareness. The solstice was never meant to be observed with passive eyes. It was meant to be lived through the body, felt through the heart, and understood through the spirit. The outer sunrise meant nothing unless it awakened a corresponding sunrise within the soul. For those who lived close to the rhythm of the earth, the darkest night was a turning point in consciousness. They had entered the winter, stripped of distractions, pressed against the limits of fear, silence, and introspection. Through the guidance of fire, the presence of the Dark Mother, and the wisdom revealed by shadow, they had navigated an inner descent. The solstice was the point where descent shifted into ascent. The return of the sun symbolized the return of clarity, purpose, and strength. It was not simply the world that brightened, it was the spirit. This inner rising began with recognition. In the stillness of the solstice, people confronted truths they had pushed aside throughout the year. They acknowledged what had been lost, what had been neglected, and what had been hidden beneath layers of routine. When the dawn finally arrived, even as a faint line on the horizon, it illuminated these inner truths. The returning sun exposed the desires that had been waiting to be embraced, the dreams that had been placed in the shadows, and the strength that had been forgotten. Sunrise became an internal revelation. Women understood this renewal with a depth shaped by their own cycles of descent and emergence. They recognized that the inner sun was not a metaphor but a lived experience. They felt the warmth of intuition returning after the deep quiet of introspection. They felt the rising energy in their bodies, like sap beginning to move through the frozen roots of trees. They taught the tribe that inner renewal begins gently, not with sudden transformation, but with the soft promise of potential. The feminine wisdom of the season guided people to nurture their inner light rather than demand it burst into brilliance all at once. For the tribe, the returning inner sun meant reclaiming agency. The long night had stripped them of excess, exposing what mattered most. With the dawn, they felt empowered to choose new directions, to strengthen weakened bonds, and to reaffirm their connection to the community and the land. The solstice did not ask them to return to life unchanged. It asked them to return awakened. It asked them to recognize the difference between resilience, built through force, and resilience built through reflection. The inner sun was a reminder that strength grows from understanding, not from resistance. The returning sun within also brought a spiritual clarity. Ancient people believed that the solstice rebalanced the human spirit. Just as the sun regained power, so too did the inner light regain dominion over the parts of the psyche that had been weighed down by the previous year. Doubt loosened its grip. Fear lost its sharpness. The darkness that once felt immense began to feel meaningful. People sensed that the shift happening in the sky mirrored the shift happening in their thoughts and emotions. Their perspective widened, their intuition sharpened, their sense of purpose strengthened. In this moment of renewal, the fire and the sun worked as partners. The fire had nurtured the inner light through the long night, sustaining it when the outer world offered little warmth. With the sun's return, the fire passed its responsibility back to the sky, allowing the spirit to rise with the returning dawn. This transition was felt deeply. The flame that once symbolized survival now symbolized possibility. The solstice invited people to consider what they would do with the light that had been restored. It asked them to step into the coming cycle with intention rather than inertia. Modern seekers often overlook this aspect of the solstice because they look outward for signs of renewal. Yet the returning sun within is not a historical belief. It is an ongoing truth. Every person experiences seasons of internal descent, periods of fatigue, confusion, or loss. The solstice teaches that these seasons are not endings. They are initiations. They prepare the soul to rise in a way that is more aligned, more conscious, and more authentic than before. To honor the solstice is to recognize where your own light has dimmed and where it is ready to rise again. The inner sun returns when you choose clarity over avoidance. It returns when you release what burdens you. It returns when you sit with your silence long enough to hear the truth beneath it. It returns when you trust that the light within you has not been extinguished, only resting. Just as the earth rotates back toward the sun, the spirit rotates back toward its own source of power. This movement is subtle, but once it begins, it changes everything. To feel the returning sun within is to remember that you carry a cycle of rebirth inside your own life. The solstice is not only a celestial event, it is a spiritual template. It shows you how to navigate darkness without collapsing into it. It shows you how to kindle light without forcing it. It shows you that transformation is a rhythm, not an explosion. When you honor this rhythm, the inner sun rises naturally, guiding you through the next phase of your journey with clarity and strength. The solstice teaches that renewal is not a reward. It is a return. The light has been with you all along, waiting for a moment of stillness to make itself known. When the inner sun rises, you feel the shift not as a sudden blaze, but as a steady warming. It is the beginning of purpose. It is the beginning of alignment. It is the beginning of the cycle that will carry you into the next chapter of your life with deeper understanding and a stronger, clearer flame. Every culture that honored the winter solstice understood one truth above all others. The light does not return because it is summoned. It returns because it cannot help but rise. The sun is bound to its rhythm, and the human spirit is bound to its own. Even in the deepest winter, even in the longest night, even in moments when hope feels faint and direction feels unclear, there is a flame inside each person that refuses to go out. That flame may shrink. It may flicker. It may drop to the barest ember, but it never disappears. The solstice is the moment when this truth becomes visible. Throughout this journey, you have moved through the ancient landscape of the long night. The consciousness of fire, the breath of the dark mother, the gathering of voices, the art of offering, the power of silence, the presence of shadow, the reclamation of ritual, and the rising of inner light. These were not separate pieces of history. They were steps in a ritual of remembering, a ritual designed not to teach you about the past, but to guide you back to yourself. The solstice is more than an event on the wheel of the year. It is an internal initiation, a return to the center of who you are beneath the noise, beneath the distractions, beneath the stories that have shaped you without your consent. The flame that refuses to die is the truth of your own resilience. It is the quiet awareness inside you that knows how to rebuild even after difficulty. It is the instinct that pulls you toward meaning, even when the world feels overwhelming. It is the part of you that recognizes when something must end and trusts that something new will eventually rise in its place. Ancient people honored this flame because they understood what we often forget. Survival is not merely physical, it is spiritual. It requires courage to see the world as it is, honesty to see yourself as you are, and trust to step into a future that has not yet revealed its shape. In the depths of winter, the ancestors felt this truth pressing against their ribs as they gathered around the fire. They knew that the world outside their circle could be harsh and unforgiving, but they also knew that the fire in their hearts was stronger than the cold. Their rituals were not attempts to control nature, they were acts of alignment with it. By tending the flame, they tended their spirit. By honoring the darkness, they honored the cycle. By trusting the return of the sun, they trusted the return of their own clarity. This rhythm shaped their worldview, and it remains a profound lesson for anyone seeking meaning today. Modern life often pulls people away from this rhythm. The constant demand to produce, perform, and push forward disconnects many from the natural cycle of descent and renewal. Yet, no matter how far one drifts from the earth's wisdom, the flame within continues to burn. It waits for a moment of stillness. It waits for recognition. It waits for the internal solstice to point, where the soul turns back toward its own light. When that moment comes, whether through ritual, reflection, or necessity, the same ancient truth awakens. The flame within you is older than your fear. It is older than your doubt. It is older than every challenge you have faced. The winter solstice does not demand celebration. It invites it. It invites you to pause long enough to see where your inner fire has dimmed and where it is ready to rise. It invites you to remember that endings are not failures but transformations. It invites you to release what you have outgrown and to honor what you have become. It invites you to stand at the edge of the longest night and trust the promise that light returns not because you command it, but because it is part of your nature to rise. When you honor the solstice, you reconnect with a lineage of human souls who have walked through darkness with courage. You align yourself with the wisdom of the earth, which teaches through seasons rather than words. You enter a cycle of renewal that has shaped life for thousands of years. And most importantly, you acknowledge the part of yourself. Culture that honored the winter solstice understood one truth above all others. The light does not return because it is summoned. It returns because it cannot help but rise. The sun is bound to its rhythm, and the human spirit is bound to its own. Even in the deepest winter, even in the longest night, even in moments when hope feels faint and direction feels unclear, there is a flame inside each person that refuses to go out. That flame may shrink, it may flicker, it may drop to the barest ember, but it never disappears. The solstice is the moment when this truth becomes visible. Throughout this journey, you have moved through the ancient landscape of the long night. The consciousness of fire, the breath of the dark mother, the gathering of voices, the art of offering, the power of silence, the presence of shadow, the reclamation of ritual, and the rising of inner light. These were not separate pieces of history. They were steps in a ritual of remembering, a ritual designed not to teach you about the past, but to guide you back to yourself. The solstice is more than an event on the wheel of the year. It is an internal initiation, a return to the center of who you are, beneath the noise, beneath the distractions, beneath the stories that have shaped you without your consent. The flame that refuses to die is the truth of your own resilience. It is the quiet awareness inside you that knows how to rebuild even after difficulty. It is the instinct that pulls you toward meaning even when the world feels overwhelming. It is the part of you that recognizes when something must end and trusts that something new will eventually rise in its place. Ancient people honored this flame because they understood what we often forget. Survival is not merely physical, it is spiritual. It requires courage to see the world as it is, honesty to see yourself as you are, and trust to step into a future that has not yet revealed its shape. In the depths of winter, the ancestors felt this truth pressing against their ribs as they gathered around the fire. They knew that the world outside their circle could be harsh and unforgiving, but they also knew that the fire in their hearts was stronger than the cold. Their rituals were not attempts to control nature, they were acts of alignment with it. By tending the flame, they tended their spirit. By honoring the darkness, they honored the cycle. By trusting the return of the sun, they trusted the return of their own clarity. This rhythm shaped their worldview, and it remains a profound lesson for anyone seeking meaning today. Modern life often pulls people away from this rhythm. The constant demand to produce, perform, and push forward disconnects many from the natural cycle of descent and renewal. Yet no matter how far one drifts from the earth's wisdom, the flame within continues to burn. It waits for a moment of stillness. It waits for recognition. It waits for the internal solstice, the point where the soul turns back toward its own light. When that moment comes, whether through ritual, reflection, or necessity, the same ancient truth awakens. The flame within you is older than your fear. It is older than your doubt. It is older than every challenge you have faced. The winter solstice does not demand celebration. It invites. It invites you to pause long enough to see where your inner fire has dimmed and where it is ready to rise. It invites you to remember that endings are not failures, but transformations. It invites you to release what you have outgrown and to honor what you have become. It invites you to stand at the edge of the longest night and trust the promise that light returns not because you command it, but because it is part of your nature to rise. When you honor the solstice, you reconnect with the lineage of human souls who have walked through darkness with courage. You align yourself with the wisdom of the earth, which teaches through seasons rather than words. You enter a cycle of renewal that has shaped life for thousands of years. And most importantly, you acknowledge the part of yourself that has survived every winter you have ever faced. The flame within you has burned through heartbreak, loss, uncertainty, and transformation. It has guided you when logic failed. It has held you when hope felt out of reach. It has carried you to every new beginning you have ever experienced. The solstice is the remembrance that this flame will keep burning. The darkness does not own you. It only shapes you. It teaches you where your strength lives, where your tenderness lives, where your truth lives. And when the dawn finally rises, it reveals the light that was inside you all along. The solstice shows you that you are not defined by what you endure, but by the fire that carries you through it. As the cycle turns and the sun begins its ascent, you carry forward the ancient knowledge that the flame within you cannot be extinguished. It is the inheritance of every soul that has ever walked this earth. It is the pulse of life itself. It is the eternal spark that rises again and again, answering the call of the returning light. The flame refuses to die. And so do you. Hat has survived every winter you have ever faced. The flame within you has burned through heartbreak, loss, uncertainty, and transformation. It has guided you when logic failed. It has held you when hope felt out of reach. It has carried you to every new beginning you have ever experienced. The solstice is the remembrance that this flame will keep burning. The darkness does not own you. It only shapes you. It teaches you where your strength lives, where your tenderness lives, where your truth lives, and when the dawn finally rises, it reveals the light that was inside you all along. The solstice shows you that you are not defined by what you endure, but by the fire that carries you through it. As the cycle turns and the sun begins its ascent, you carry forward the ancient knowledge that the flame within you cannot be extinguished. It is the inheritance of every soul that has ever walked this earth. It is the pulse of life itself. It is the eternal spark that rises again and again, answering the call of the returning light. The flame refuses to die, and so do you. The flame within you knows this path. Subscribe, and let us journey together through the cycles of the earth and soul. Blessed be